Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I wonder if those words ever haunted him. And you know what? Here's what I think. And I can't help but think the other night, I thought it was, I don't know, we can throw the word miracle around, but as those fellows were singing, practicing in that church, and that fellow walks in. I've seen a lot of things in my life, but to me that was exciting because I think, here are these guys up here trying to sound better, trying to gel, trying to do better, trying to make sure that they're no doubt pleasing, because that's what we do, pleasing to the human ear, but they were pleasing to the heart of God because they were singing about him, and there's somebody that came and prayed. To me, Brother Mike, it's almost like your group was like this situation here. I think what Stephen was saying, God was going to take those words and use them, and I believe he did use them. I believe that it was something that came back time after time, and I think it was something that mayhap the Apostle Paul never sits down and just basically comes out and says in any of his writings. I remember being there when Stephen died and hearing what he said, and it convicted me. But I do think that he lived with a lot of things in his past, and I think some of those things are some of the times that Satan would come and gouge him with certain things. People have said before that Paul prayed, and he prayed 3 times, that there was a messenger of Satan to come to buffet him. Some people say they think it might have been an individual. Some people say that they think it might have been his eyesight and how that he was hindered by that at a time. I think when the Lord opened his eyes, I don't think he probably didn't have trouble with being blind anymore. I mean, why would you say my name is Paul and I'm blind if the Lord just gave your eyesight back? But you still had a past. And he still had a history. And just like you or just like me, we may still have a past. And some people's past may be something that they wouldn't mind to share or let anybody know about. But I can guarantee you've sat in the presence of people that wouldn't want their past known by anybody. And so here, as this is said, they stoned him. He calls on God saying, receive my spirit. And as he kneels there, he cries with a loud voice, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. Chapter 8 and verse 1. And Paul was consenting unto his death. And at that time there was a great persecution against the church, which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial, and made great lamentation over him. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering into every house, and hailing men and women, committed them to prison. Therefore they that were scattered abroad went everywhere, preaching the word. You know, persecution isn't a bad thing. My uncle was my pastor for a while, of course, and I remember him saying to me, he said, George, he said, you see problems in churches sometimes. He said, and I won't say that it's the best thing. He said, but I will say this. He said, when something happens in a church, he said, maybe there are things that happen that somebody should have maybe left them been somewhere else and wouldn't go where they were needed to go. So now they go, maybe begrudgingly, but they go out, and maybe God can bless through that as well. So all persecution or all trouble, we may look at and say, well, that wasn't too good. But if God's going to use the person wherever else, that's the most important thing, is that they're being used by God. And so here Saul is making havoc of the church. And then Philip went down and he preached, and the Ethiopian eunuch is saved. And then the Lord begins to deal in chapter 9 with Paul. And I won't read to you about his conversion, because I no doubt we can read it another time, but no doubt you probably have read it or heard of it preached. But just as if you had just heard the word of God for the first time, maybe you went home that night and trying to understand what it was that you'd heard or what you had read or what you had listened to. Maybe you were one of those people who were raised by Christians, and maybe you were a person who didn't know much about God but listened to it on the radio, and maybe the Lord spoke to you there. But whatever of the cause and whatever has been in the past for you, I would say to you that you don't have to live there, but you need to be so thankful for what God has brought you from. From the name change, and I don't understand it. I've got books at home I've read about. You can get on the internet and you can find out other people's opinions and what they say, but we do know that Luke, particularly in this book, in these 3 chapters, he calls him Saul of Tarsus, Saul of Tarsus, Saul of Tarsus, and then all of a sudden there is a name change. Some people say, some professors would say, well, you're making more of that than what you should. Well, I mean, if you called me Jack for 3 chapters and now all of a sudden you call me George until the end of the book, there'd probably be something different. What happened? I don't know if it was the actual name change, but I do know that if it wasn't a name change, I know it was a change of heart. And when you look at him in this chapter 8, when you see that he's coming out and he's still breathing out cursing and threatenings, you see that. To me, it's like seeing Peter when Peter is not where he needs to be with God versus where he's right with God at the day of Pentecost. Because here he is, when you read about Peter, you see that now he goes fishing after the Lord has passed, and they've put him in the tomb, and now they don't know where his body is, and Peter says, I'm going fishing. It just seemed like a different man when you see him after that day of Pentecost. And I'm telling you, that's the same thing that happens to Paul. Here he is, and even in chapter 9, that scripture says, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest, desiring letters. He's not somebody you would have wanted to be around. If you're a Christian tonight, he's not somebody you would have wanted to be around, because he would have been somebody that would look at you from a distance and say, I'm coming after you. I'm going to get you. And you know what? I think the Lord was doing the same thing. I'm coming after you. I'm going to get you. And he does. Why do I say all that? Here's what I want to leave with you for tonight. Time and time again, he goes out breathing out threatenings and slaughters. There are things in his life that no doubt he would not want anybody to know. But the Lord speaks to him. And when he speaks to him, immediately, this is not the voice of the preacher in the pulpit preaching tonight you got saved or the morning you got saved. This is not hearing that man's vocal cords. This is Jesus speaking to him directly. And there is no doubt that when he hears him, he says, Lord, who art thou? There is something different about that experience, and there's something different about him for the rest of his life. He lives and dies for Jesus Christ after he meets him on that road to Damascus. But does he have a past? Yes. Does it ever make him stop and quit? No. Does he still live in the area where some people would say, hey, wait a minute, that's that guy. You remember they took their coats off and they laid them down at his feet. There he is. Well, word traveled fast, no doubt. We know whenever it was said that he needed to go down, Ananias said, Lord, I've heard of him. I know about him. I don't want to go around him. So he was no doubt well known. And for doing what he was doing, no doubt he was well known. And I'd say he had a lot of people that maybe never laid a hand against a believer, a Christian, but they probably were glad that Saul of Tarsus did, because they were serving Jehovah God, they believed. And here all these people were talking about this Jesus who had claimed to be somebody that they didn't believe he was who he said he was. But he was. Whatever it is in your past. I said tonight when I was praying that maybe it is that God can use this, a part of this, something said tonight to help you heal. And there have been times that I have had to pray for God to help the same thing in my life. There are things that over a period of time that maybe you do. Never in the world did I ever think I'd be a preacher. So I never conducted myself in a manner that when I stood behind the pulpit, I would never have to be ashamed of my past. You know, I had no great scheme of things that I would be. I wanted to be a rock and roll guitar player. Well, if I was going to be a rock and roll guitar player, there's a lot of things I've done in my past that make me look like a puppy dog compared to rock and roll guitar players. But there are things that I had done in my past that would also make you blush. What do I do with that? Did God not know it was coming? Does God look and say, okay, then, I tried to tell you because you're not saved now, but one day you would have been, but I'm not going to save you now because of what you're experiencing. No, he used Paul and knew that when he tempered him, when he brought him out of the fire and tempered him and made him what he wanted him to be, he would be something that would never bend, he would never break, he would never bow because he knew his past. And I'm going to tell you something. 30-some years, there have been times that I have sat down, Jim. I have been tired spiritually. I have wondered why certain things have happened. But it is sometimes my past and the love of God and the forgiveness of God that says to me, just keep going. Just keep going. You can't just love God when things are good. When things get hard sometimes, and maybe even, like I said, I'll use myself for an example at times when I would grieve. There would be things that, now some of you say, well, man, we must have a really bad preacher. Well, it depends on how you look at that, I guess. But there would be things that I wouldn't want my grandkids to know about. I guess it would be liberating to say, well, okay, I did this, but if I were to sit down, Paul, with Addie or with Gage and Emma, and they were in their 20s and they experienced something, and I'd be the old man of the family, but if I were to sit down with them, there's no need for me to have to hide my life. God didn't send me through it and make me go through it, but he saved me from that, and I could say to them, I have been where you are, and God can help you as well. And he can. So the past is horrible, but it's usable. For you, the past may be horrible. And for some of us in here tonight, I understand that although I preach and you may listen to it, you might not really grasp it the way some other people would. But here's the Apostle Paul. He'd never been in jail or prison until he got saved. I mean, he was probably top notch, but not in God's eyes he wasn't. And so I believe that God used his past to keep him on his path, on the way that God had for him to go. So if you need healing tonight from the past, if you have experiences that you wish you could run from, and we're sitting outside the other night, what was that? What night was that? Must have been, was it Saturday night? Anyhow, we're sitting out there, and Saturday night, Sunday night, it was a night. I know it was a night because we were watching those comets, those meteors. And we built a fire, and we're sitting out there, and Teresa and Addie go in the house for a few minutes or something. Me and Paul were talking, and I said, there are things, Paul, that if I could go back now and redo from when I was young and do them over, I would. And Paul said, but Dad, I think probably everybody's got something like that. And maybe some of us have more than one thing. Build on it. Don't let it destroy you. Just build on it. Just build on it. Just be who you are. Accept what it is that God has called you to do and work from there. Anyone tonight like to come and pray before we dismiss? Lord, I pray that you would encourage him tonight, strengthen him, Lord. Make him the man that he always desired to be through you. Lord, make him the person that he desires to be, Lord, no matter whose life he touches tonight. Lord, I pray, God, you would bless him. God, I know that you won't make him or maybe allow him to forget the past, but you never bring it up to him, God. So I pray, Lord, you would bless him, Lord, as you have me. Help him, Lord, to be able to live understanding that what is